Hey, what's up? My name is Chris, and welcome to Coding in Public. This video really is for one person, and that is somebody by the name of Adrian. Now, Adrian signed up as a new patron. He's the only one I have, and I haven't really talked about it much, but he heard about it once and immediately signed up just as a thank you. Now, I wish I had time to do a bunch of extra stuff for patrons right now. The most it is really is just a thank you to me, and so I wanted to at least respond in kind by answering some questions he had about responsive design, and I trust this will be a help to you as well. So what I want to talk about today is 5 different principles that if you understand these can really help you be well on your way to understanding responsive design. So what I'm going to do is work through this project, which I've done on the channel before actually and built this entire thing out, but we're going to use this as an example to make sure that I can kind of walk you through these 5 steps. I hope it'll be a help to you, Adrian, and I hope it'll be a help to everyone else as well. All right, let's jump right in. All right, so if I come over this way, you can see I've got the project up in my code editor, and here are the 5 parts I want to walk you through. Now, this first one is really basic, but if you forget about it, it can really mess up a bunch of stuff. And that is, you want to make sure you have this meta viewport tag in here that has the width set to the device width and the initial scale to 1.0. Now, this normally comes by default when you start up an HTML page. So for instance, if you're in VS Code, you automatically get emit by default. But if you just do a bang like that and enter, it'll add that for you automatically. It's this tag right here that you need to make sure that you have, because it basically will allow the text and everything else to scale with the size of the viewport correctly. So that's the very first tip. It's a basic one, but if you forget about it, you can kind of be scratching your head for a long time not knowing what's going on. All right, the second thing is you want to make sure that all of your images are set to a max width of 100%. And let me show you what happens if you don't do that. So if I come back over this way, let's go ahead and find my image. And I'm going to get rid of this right here and save. And you can see suddenly I no longer have a responsive design. In fact, I've got this bar across the bottom, and no matter what I do, nothing is going to shrink that image. So you always want to set it to max width 100%. And images are always going to take the full amount that the viewport allows unless you cap it in some way. So what I always do as kind of a reset is I always set all my images to a max width of 100%. That means they'll never be larger than the viewport itself. And they should then automatically scale for you as you move your viewport up and down. Now in this example, I set it on this exact image, but usually what I would do is come up here to the very top where I have my reset right up here. And then I would say something like image, and I would set this to a max width of 100%. I usually also make this a display of block just because by default images are inline, and usually most of my images are blocks unless I want to override that and make them inline. So that's what I usually do, but this max width 100% is going to be a big help to you when it comes to responsive design. All right, third, it's really important never to set actual fixed heights on things when you can help it. It might be tempting to come in here and say, okay, well for this, I want to make sure that it is 200 pixels or whatever, something like that. So if I come back down here, let me see if I can find that again. And I come up here and let's say I set this to like a height of 200 pixels. Well, now what I've done is I've capped it, and now it's not going all the way across. And as I pull, it's not going to change either. So it's going to basically be capped by that intrinsic ratio of the image because I've set a height. So height colon anything is almost always a bad idea. That's not saying you can never use it. Like for instance, I would probably use it on these little icons. I'm sure I probably did. But aside from something like that, I'm really never going to set a height on anything. I will allow everything to kind of take up its natural amount of height, its auto amount of height, and then I can adjust how it sits with things like Flexbox or Grid. So that's the third thing, is never set a height on pretty much anything in your entire document because things will stick to that height no matter what else you do. Fourth, I would encourage you to really think about responsive spacing and typography. Now in this particular project, the way I set this up, and again, you can go watch the videos if you want to on this, is I set everything up with the clamp property. And I've got spacers set with this clamp property, and I've also got my font sizes. Now by doing it that way, what this clamp property does is it gives you a small size, it gives you the largest it'll ever allow it to be, and then this is basically what it's trying to reach. And notice that all of these are using viewport widths, and I show you how to set this up, and they will basically try to meet this amount no matter what the size the screen is. So look at this typography right here. As I'm scaling it, notice that the typography is actually changing live on like a linear scale. It's just getting larger and larger and larger, and it's eventually going to cap at this size. Let's see. I think this is font size 1 here. So at 5.5 rem is the largest this will be, and then it will basically stay at that no matter how big the screen gets. I come back down, and once I'm smaller than 5.5, it starts to scale all the way back down, but it's never going to get smaller than this 2 rem. So this kind of responsive typography allows you to really set up pretty easily an entire system like this. Now, notice that I'm also doing the same thing on these spacers. So I've got spacers showing up all throughout here. These spaces between here, notice that as I pull this up once again, they get larger and larger and larger, and then eventually they're going to cap in at their largest amount they're allowed to be. Now, these aren't as dramatic, so I go anywhere from 32 pixels to 75 pixels, and you can see that that adjusts. So whether or not you use a clamp property or simply use viewport widths or some kind of responsive unit, it allows you to very easily scale from a small screen size to something larger. Now, again, if you want to see how I did this particular project, there are videos on this. I've also done more regular videos, more recent videos on this clamp property, and I've showed you how to get this up really quick and started. You can get an entire typography scale set out literally by copying one line of code from a really cool website, but I'll let you check that out in that other video, which I'll post below and try to remember to put at the end. The fifth and final thing is to think about mobile first design. And for this one, I actually want to move over to the Figma. Now, first of all, shout out to this dark mode in Figma. This is new, and I'm very grateful for it. I like dark mode, although now I want to change all this to be dark as well because now my eyes are burning. But here we are, all right? So think about responsive or mobile design first usually means you're thinking about your most simple design first. And as you're laying this out, you also want to think about where it's going. But to start with, it's easiest if you just think about exactly what it's going to look like at its most simple point, which is mobile. So here you can see I'm just stacking all this up. It comes all the way down. It just is one thing right after the other. And then I split this right here. And in fact, on smaller screen sizes, I wrap this down as well. Once you have that basic layout set, then what I like to do is kind of group out where I want this to move once it moves to a bigger screen size. And sometimes I'll use these red boxes or anything else in Figma to kind of set these off. So for instance, no matter what the screen is, I know that this is going to be one grouped section. And you can see that here, and you can also see that if I move that over this way. So this is all going to be the exact same section no matter what it's on. Now notice that there's weird spacing here, but this whole section is the exact same. That means this is going to be its own separate section. So I can come up here and maybe grab this out here. For me, laying this out with these boxes helps me think of kind of how I need this to adjust. This I'm seeing is going to be on its third little section, and these two together. I know that it's going to wrap up like this on mobile, and then it'll snap back down here on desktop. Now notice as well, if I look down this way, I've got several different sections. I've got these two that are going to live in their own little grid, and on desktop like this, they're going to be stacked like this. This will actually be the same way they're going to be on really, truly mobile, small screen sizes, not this iPad Pro. And then on the iPad, they're going to sit next to each other, but they'll sit down here below. So these two sections are also connected to this third section down here. So maybe I do something like this just to signify that these are together. And again, you can come in here and kind of do whatever makes sense to you. I'm just reminding myself, hey, these are all connected. All right, and then if I come all the way up here, you're going to see that all of this is always going to be grouped together no matter what screen size it's in or anything like that. So thinking about this as responsive or mobile first and then snapping this out helps me kind of realize the sections I've got. So really I've got 5 sections. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, even though 4 and 5 will be grouped together when it comes to mobile design. So thinking through those 5 then allows me to basically figure out what tools am I going to need. In this case, I used grid here internally here, and then grid on the entire page to lay out exactly where these things sit, and I did it with a bunch of columns, which you can actually emulate here in Figma. Now, I do plan to have a series at some point, probably in a few months, walking through Figma for developers, because you're always forced to kind of use these design tools, even though you don't really understand how to design. At least that's how I feel. So I just want to share whatever I know, and I'm no expert, but I hope it can be a help to some of you. Now, writing out these boxes might seem kind of tedious, but believe it or not, just mentally setting these things out, at least for me, maybe I'm just more visual, is a super big help to me because now I know exactly what I need. I know here I need grid. I know here I need flexbox because it's just one dimension. I know here, this is just grid internally here. This, I need flexbox to hold both 4 and 5. And then inside here, I also know I need flexbox. So thinking through these boxes and just taking just a couple of minutes to lay this out really can alleviate a lot of the frustrations that come with trying to do this on the fly live as you're coding. Well, I hope this was a big help to you. If you have any questions, let me know. And again, a big, huge thanks to Adrian. And I hope this was a help to you in particular. Thanks so much. I'll catch you in the next one. Happy coding.